Hello YouTube. I'm going to do a response video to a comment that I got on my last video, and it's from a viewer who calls themselves JBVann with 2 N's, and I'm going to read out the comment first of all, and then I'm going to respond to the comment in an authentic, truthful way. And the reason why I'm doing it through a video is because if I tried to text respond to this very detailed comment that I got, it would lose the nuance, it would lose the tone, and it would be open to further misinterpretation and misunderstanding. And I appreciate that even doing a video response may also be open to misunderstanding, but it's less likely to be so. And the other thing I would say is this is in response to my last video, which was on Saturday the 10th of August, a reasonably short video, and in preparation for this I did re-watch that, or re-listen to that video, and I stand by everything that I said in that. It is a true reflection about what I think. The only caveat is the ranty bit towards the end of the video, probably towards the last sort of third of the video, I think could have been worded slightly more clearly or coherently. Although the sentiment that I was expressing was completely correct, there are ways of describing what I think, and because I don't script these videos, I just say what comes to my head in the moment. So although I'm not rowing back on anything I said in that video, I do appreciate that the last bit of it was a bit more ranty than maybe I meant it to be, but that was obviously truthful at the time. So let me read out the comment that I got from JBVann. The only thing about this that I'm not sure about is I don't know if this person has ever commented before. I don't remember specifically any comments from them, but because of what they said and because of the way they said it, I've taken this very seriously, and I respect completely what they're saying, and I'll read it out first of all, and then I'll talk about it. So, I think that when you produce content for YouTube, saying you won't listen to the advice of the people who've taken the time to become invested in you by watching your output is in danger of coming off as really quite arrogant, full stop. Next paragraph. If you were managing to make a commercially successful go of it, then I think people would be less inclined to offer you advice, full stop. Feedback is a gift, what you choose to do with it is up to you, no, full stop, no comma, sorry. But some of your content is clearly triggering a percentage of your audience, full stop. You can choose to hide and say, well, it's just someone trolling you, or you could choose to be brave, reflective, and look at why that might be, full stop. Some of the people commenting and offering advice, do know you really well, They've watched 100 or so hours of your content, and have a really good idea of who you are professionally, how you run, what you're really good at, and what you're making a right pig's ear of, full stop. I think times are also hard, rates are low, and in you choosing to run at 45p a mile, all miles in a LWB is probably ruffling a lot of feathers out there, full stop. I do also think that people like me are invested in you, like you, enjoy the content and want to see you be sustainable financially, full stop. This isn't meant to be derogatory, but going by the financial numbers you're putting out, it's difficult to form any other conclusion than you're choosing to operate this as a hobby, It's great that you can choose to do this because you love it and you have some money in the bank, so that you'll be able to replace the van when you've worn it out, comma, and subsidise your earnings in order to pay your bills, full stop. It's also important to know your audience, comma. Many people working on the CX don't have the privilege you have, comma, so can't understand it, comma. It also probably seems unfair to them that you can choose to buy in the work just because you enjoy doing it, full stop. You don't want, next paragraph, you don't want advice, comma, but I'm going to offer you some, comma, based upon the YouTube journey we've had together, full stop. Do with it what you like, comma, ignore it if you're too proud, full stop. So next paragraph, number 1, stop discussing your financials on YouTube, comma, they bear absolutely no importance to you, comma, because you're not doing it for that, comma, but in reality it's the only metric that most of the other people working in the sector choose to value, full stop. Also, your figures aren't that useful to anyone wanting to get into the sector, comma, as you're not running it as a viable, sustainable business, comma, you're doing it for the love of it, so talk about that more. Number 2, I'm really sorry you're having health issues, comma, I think you could mitigate some of these issues you're having professionally with not being able to lift and having to be back for dialysis, etc., by swapping out the LWB for a small van, comma. In my honest opinion, it's just way more enjoyable, comma, cheaper to run, and if you have to dead mile home from Scotland, comma, then it isn't going to kick you nuts all the way home, full stop. They're also way cheaper to replace, comma, insure, and are easier to drive, full stop. Walking into an office to collect an A4 envelope is also a complete joy, comma, compared to having to wait for a forklift driver to pull a 3-metre pallet of their whatever, full stop. I also think that you won't see any loss of earnings as you seem to be charging the cheaper end of the small van rate a lot of the time at the moment anyway, full stop. Next paragraph, final paragraph, whatever you choose to do, comma, earnestly I wish you good luck and I hope you can make it meaningful, comma, fulfilling and sustainable in order so that you can keep doing what you love for as long as you please, full stop. If you want to flip this off as just some random on YouTube and you know better, then do that, comma, it'll probably make for more interesting viewing, exclamation mark, and then it says go well, Jay. So, as I said, quite a long and detailed comment there, which is quite unusual for the comments on my YouTube channel. I get some comments that are quite detailed, but this one is really in depth. It explained itself really clearly. It's well presented grammatically and punctually, and its sentiment, I think, is very interesting. So I want to go through each paragraph and give a response, because otherwise I'll just forget if I do the whole thing in one go. And before I do that, I want to give you an honest reflection as to my reaction to this when I read it the first time and then the second time. So I had 3 comments when I looked at this last night, and this was probably the first one I looked at, I think, of the 3. And I started reading it, and when I read the word arrogant in the first paragraph, I did get my heckles up emotionally, because that's not something I want to be, but I'll come back to that when I talk about it. And then I carried on reading it. I got as far as reading to the 5th or so paragraph, which said, you don't want advice, but I'm going to offer you some anyway. And I thought, wow, okay, that's really quite aggressive. So, and at this point I thought, I can't read anymore. This was reading last night. And I was reflecting a bit on it, and I thought, that's interesting, I want to read more. Because I don't, even though I close the YouTube down, I just close it up, I'm still mulling it through in my mind, because that's how my mind works. I didn't lose any sleep over it, but I did think about it quite a lot before I went to bed. And then this morning I thought at some point I'm going to have to read the rest of that and give myself, permission to read it all with a more reflective mindset. So I did that this morning, and I got through the whole thing, and at that point I thought, actually the tone of that is really supportive and really kind. So although I had an initial negative emotional reaction, and I still do to some of the words, my overall response to this is the JD or JVB, let me just check, JBVann comes across as being someone that cares about me, that wants me to do well, that is looking out for my best interests. So that is the context within which I've read this out to you in this video. But even despite that context, there are some aspects of the wording that I just don't agree with. And I think it's a really interesting and worthwhile exercise to go through that in some detail and explain what are the things I don't agree with, what are the things I do agree with, and maybe we can come to some sort of consensus understanding of each other. So that's what I'm going to do now. I am very mindful, also before I do this, I know my character very well, and in the past, for a lot of my life, I would ignore and suppress my emotions, and in the last couple of years I've chosen to kind of engage with my emotions. And so when I read something that's I feel is an attack, I try to allow that emotion to play out, get myself back to an even keel, and then go back to that with a more logical, reasoned mindset. I don't want to live a life where I never experience negative emotions, because that isn't really a life. And so by me having a YouTube channel and having these comments, I don't block any comments. So if anybody wants to make any comment, they are free to do so on the stuff that I give out. My choice is, do I bother to engage with those comments? And there is a line at which I will and won't engage with them depending on how I perceive them. So just having a negative reaction doesn't mean I won't engage. In fact, I'm probably more likely to engage in depth because I want to explain more about my negative emotion. So this was probably one of the best comments I've ever received, because it did elicit quite a lot of negativity in me, but it was done, I think, from a place of genuinely caring about me, which I think is an interesting dynamic, and one that we should on social media engage with more often, and not just have some instant short reaction. So let me go through it and just kind of give some comments. I haven't prepped my response. I'm going to give what I think are full responses to each of those paragraphs, and I will miss stuff out, I will misexplain stuff, but I don't think it's going to be ranty. It's going to be quite calm and quite sort of controlled. So, first paragraph. I think that when you produce content for YouTube, saying you won't listen to advice of the people who've taken the time to become invested in you by watching your output is in danger of coming off as really quite arrogant, full stop. So, to some extent I agree with some of that. If there are people out there who have invested time in my content, who have watched several hours of video and then have gone to the effort of making a comment, I can never criticise or be in any way grateful for that sort of response. But the thing is, from my point of view, I don't know you. I don't know who's watching. I don't know if you were aware, we don't get given the names of subscribers. So the only way that a YouTube creator knows in inverted commas a person is if they regularly comment. I can't go into I've not got a social list. I can't go, oh, this person subscribed for this time, this person watched this many hours of video. I've got no idea how many minutes or hours or videos any of you watch. All I know is a total number of views, which could be a few seconds, not the whole thing, and a total number of subscribers, and there's a bit of data about where they're based in terms of their geography and whether they define themselves as male or female. And age is another age metric that you know. But actually, in terms of me knowing if anyone is actually engaged, the only way I can do that is through people commenting on a regular basis. And also, from me personally, I do take into account the way that people choose to engage. Do they choose to express themselves clearly? Do they actually go to the effort of explaining their position? Whether it's against or for me is irrelevant, but if you go to that effort, I'm going to take you more seriously. Those people that kind of put in quite a shorthand, non-thinking in my view comment, why would I take them as seriously? So, JBVann, I've got no idea, to be honest, if you've ever made another comment, but I'm going to take it at face value because of the way you've written it, that you have been engaged for a long time with my content, and in which case you have got the right to say whatever you want, and I will respect that. I might not agree with it, but I will respect it and listen to it. The point here at the end is basically if I won't listen to the advice of these people, I'm in danger of coming off as being quite arrogant. Well, my point about that is, I learned a long time ago, I know how I want to come across, and I can only control what I say, how I say it, and who I talk to, and how I talk to them. If the person I'm communicating with, be that online or in real life, thinks I'm being arrogant, I can't change that unless they tell me, and then I can sort of say, oh no, I'm not. So obviously I respect that is a view that you actually have. Well, the other thing is, JBVann words in a very clever way, saying people might find this arrogant if you don't listen to them. But I take from that, actually, JBVann found me a bit arrogant, because they wouldn't have come up with that word unless they had that feeling themselves, and and I have no issue with them feeling that and expressing that, because I value their point. I obviously I don't want to come across as arrogant, and I try not to, but I've learned not to worry about if that is what people think of me, because everyone has their own way of perceiving what other people say, and I can't control that. So, for the sake of the record, I don't want to be come across as arrogant, but I appreciate that some people will always think that I am, because there's a lot of people on social media. Right, next paragraph. This is going to be quite a long video, by the way, so it's going to be at least 50 minutes, I reckon. But so if you don't want to listen to the rest of it, fair dues. It's not for everyone. Second paragraph. If you are managing to make a commercially successful go of it, then I think people would be less inclined to offer you advice, full stop. Feedback is a gift, which you choose to do with is up to you, but some of your content is clearly triggering perceptions of your audience. We have to stop there because there's so much in that first bit. It's not the whole paragraph, but I'm going to stop there. So, it is obvious to me and to everyone that I'm currently not able to make this work commercially. If you define commercially as being I can pay for all my business costs and all my personal expenditure. Now, I've done some maths over the weekend, and I can tell you that I am able to pay my business costs reasonably easily. What I'm struggling with is making enough money to live after paying those debts, after paying those fees. And I'll go in perhaps on another video about what the figures are, but that's not really the nature of this one. So absolutely correct, I'm not currently being, in your terms, commercially successful. So I agree with that, but I don't agree that gives strangers online the right to give me unsolicited advice. I don't think that they should, when I specifically said I don't want it. There are other people on YouTube who would say, I'm happy to receive any advice you want to give me, and they say that. But why is it that if somebody says to you, I specifically don't want advice, I don't need advice from strangers, why is that? Why do you then think, not you, JBVann, but why do these people that you refer to think they have the right to give me advice anyway? As I said before, if you are someone who's invested in me in whatever way, and I know that, I've got more chance of listening to it But if you're just a randomer, as I said in my other video, give me a comment out of the blue, I'm not going to take any notice of that. And I'm also not of an age to sort of ignore that and not push back. This is what I'm doing. I'm pushing back on that whole concept. People need to, I think, in my view, be a bit more thoughtful about why they're commenting online. Now, feedback is a gift. I absolutely agree with that. It is an amazing gift to have, and I do completely agree with that 100%. What you choose to do with it is up to you. Again, I absolutely agree with that. The person receiving the feedback should always be grateful for thoughtful feedback, but they don't have to be grateful for all feedback, and that's the difference I think I would make here. And interestingly, I like this phrase, some of your content is clearly triggering a percentage of your audience. That is a really insightful and thoughtful comment. I found that one of the best things that I read in this. I think you're absolutely right. I don't know who they are, and obviously some of the comments I get are because people are triggered from their own experiences. But I would say to that, that's for them to deal with. I shouldn't change what I do in my channel or how I express myself. If they're triggered, they think about how they deal with that, and they have to deal with that. Right, carry on reading the comments. So I'm really into this now. You can choose to hide and say, well, it's just someone trolling you, or you could choose to be brave, reflective, and look at why that might be. Some of the people commenting offering advice do know you really well. They've watched 100 or so hours of your content and have a really good idea of who you are professionally, how you run, what you are really good at, and what you're making a right big ear of. So, I've kind of addressed a lot of that in my preamble when I said that I don't know if a commenter is a long-time viewer or not. But bearing in mind I don't know that as a person. Some of the people commenting and offering advice do know really well. I think that's really heartwarming, and I would say, obviously, from this comment, JBVann, and that's not a name I'm going to forget anymore. JBVann is one of those people. So they have worded this in a way, even though it's maybe it's the first time I remember them commenting, they've worded this in a way which has really engaged me and really suckered me in. That's not the right phrase. I mean, drawn me in, not suckered me in, drawn me in. So, what I don't agree with here, and I think I'm maybe being a bit too picky, but it's just how my mind works, is you can choose to hide and say, well, it's just someone trolling you. Well, I'm not hiding from anything. I don't know how you could possibly say, as a person, I'm hiding. I put my genuine, authentic views out there on a socially accessible, free to access channel, and I don't hide from any comments. I don't think I'm meant to, anyway, so I'm not hiding. I don't believe it's brave to ignore bad comments. I'm sorry, I don't believe it's not brave to ignore negative comments that are irrelevant or from people who are going to be trolling. I would say that here, trolling is in the eye of the receiver. If I perceive a comment as being trolling, then it's trolling, whether the person doing it meant it to be trolling or not. Now, I can provide feedback and say to that person, I found this was a bit trolling, or I found that it was not what I wanted. And I think most people would not engage with that. People like yourself, JBVann, would engage with that and would understand it and would be reflective. So I think that me choosing to take a comment that I get as trolling is down to me. And that would be down to my personality, my character, and the way the person has chosen to express themselves. And I have the power, if I need to ignore a troll, ignore someone who I think is trolling. Now, I don't regard this as a trolling interaction. And there's also the thing here about being reflective. I am the most reflective person I know. I reflect about everything all the time. So and I hope that this interaction has helped you to understand a bit more about who I am if it hasn't come out in my other videos. So I would say I'm not hiding, I'm not being particularly brave, but I am being reflective, and I don't regard this as being trolling. And the next bit was about basically recognising people that are engaged and sort of are kind of in support of me as a creator. And I agree. I think if that is the case, when you're making a comment, make it clear and obvious that's where you're coming from. If you're someone who is making a comment for the first time, and you're someone who's been a long-time viewer and has has a supportive view or mindset, even if it's critical, make sure you make that in your comment, and then I'm going to see the context of it. Just a random comment about your thought out of the blue, clearly people have to take a context of what they're reading. So, the phrasing here, how you run, what you're really good at, and what you're making a right pig's ear of, is a good way of summarising, isn't it? We all have our own ways of working, and JBVann will have their views about what I'm good at and what I'm bad at. And just because they have that view doesn't necessarily make it correct, but it could be correct, or it might be mostly correct or mostly wrong. But obviously, the more detail you put into a comment, the more I'm going to understand where you're coming from, and I can understand whether your comments are worth listening to or not. I like the phrase making a right pig's ear of. It's a good way of being quite negative, but actually doing it in a very kind of low-key way. So I laugh at that more than I should do, because basically what he's saying is sometimes you mess it up so much. But I do, but also I share it. I don't try and hide those mess ups. I do share it, and in that way, people can learn from my mistakes if they want to. I'm not saying they would do, because I wouldn't necessarily learn from listening to someone else's mistakes. Right, moving on. I think times are also hard, rates are low, and then you choosing to run at 45p a mile or miles in a LWB is probably ruffling a lot of feathers out there. I do also think that people like me are invested in you, like you, enjoy the content, and want to see you sustainable financially. So there's two parts to that paragraph. They are quite separate, so I'll do the first bit first. I completely agree that times are hard at the moment, and there is always a context, isn't there? There's my personal context, and there's the economic context. I don't run at 45p a mile, but clearly the rationale here is basing it on my Scotland trip in an LWB. I did a small van job to Scotland and not paid back. I won't go into the detail about that right now. I will go into it another time. I understand where it's coming from, but that's not how I see it. Let me put it that way. I look at the amount of money that I earn, because I have to pay my bills from that. The pence per mile rate is a useful tool, but isn't everything. The next point I thought was probably my second favourite sentence. Running at 45p a mile or miles in an LWB is probably ruffling a lot of feathers out there. I think you're right. I think there are lots of people who experience this who base a lot of their judgment on pence per mile, and I just don't see it quite that simply. And I can see why it's got value, and that there is there is an element of it is important, but it's not the be-all and end-all, and it's not been on for everyone. So we all have different views on our dead miles, and basically pence per mile basically is a measure of dead miles over what you get for the job. And if you're very concerned about dead miles, I'm not saying that you're wrong. If that's what works for you, then brilliant, and pence per mile is a great metric then to use. But actually, could you not realise that there are other things to look at in this? And I'm not going to apologise for my decisions to go to Scotland and back, because they are right for me at the time. It was a bit of an experiment, and I learnt a lot from it. I learnt what I would do it for, how I felt at the end of it, whether it would fit into my dialysis. I would do it again, but not necessarily quite at that rate, but I might do, depending on how desperate I am. But I said this in my video anyway, about my Scotland video. And then, again, the second part of that paragraph, people like me are invested in you, which I think is really nice to hear. Like you, that's someone saying they like me is like an amazing thing to hear. I felt so happy hearing that, because that is an authentic feeling that I had. And I'm not trying to make you feel. I don't necessarily think I come across as being particularly sensible saying that out loud, but it's genuine. I love it when people who I respect say they like me, and that is who I am. Anyway. And the fact that this is a sentence where I thought, this person actually does care about me, so I have to therefore take what they're saying really seriously. And when I read this, I thought I'm going to have to do a proper response to this, and I can't just do it in text because there's so much to say. But we're on half an hour already. I'm nowhere near finishing. Next paragraph. This isn't meant to be derogatory, but going by the financial numbers you're putting out, it's difficult to form any other conclusion than you're choosing to operate this as a hobby. It's great that you can choose to do this because you love it and have some money in the bank so that you'll be able to replace the van when you've worn it out and subsidise your earnings in order to pay bills. It's also important to know your audience. Many people working on a CX don't have the privilege you have, so can't understand it. Also, probably seems unfair to them that you can choose to buy in the work just because you enjoy doing it. So there's a lot here, and this is where I have to push back somewhat. I bet it's a lot of those points, but I want to do it respectfully and calmly because I want to express my point of view in response to JBVann's very thoughtful comment. So advice to those of you out there who do want to comment, if you're going to say something that's going to be negative, do put in there this comment, this isn't meant to be derogatory, because it is giving a good sort of context to what's going to come next. And then you got the word but, so I'm prepared for some attacks here, inverted commas attacks, but I've been prepped to feel it's not from a bad place. So it's a really well worded comment all through, to be honest. So the point here, what I'm going to react against first of all is that JBVann used the word choice twice, and I find that I'm going to respond against that. I find it quite I disagree with it a lot. So I'm not choosing to run as a hobby. I don't have that as an easy choice. I have been forced, because of health issues, to adapt the way that I work. The only choice that I'm making is not giving up on doing this work, because I do love it so much, and there's more to my life than just earning enough money, although that does worry me a lot. I've done other videos about that. I won't go into it right now. So I'm going to push back at JBVann and say this is by no means a choice. This is me trying to be resilient and trying to be responsive to a difficult situation that I'm going through. I'm choosing to not assume this is going to be like this forever, but I have got no date at which things are going to change. So right now I'm in a transitional point, and I am trying my best to work my way through it and retain the things I love in my life, because I've lived a lot of my life doing stuff I don't like. Now, I do have a bit of money behind me because I sold my house when I separated from my wife. Because I sold my house, I got a little bit of money. It's not a lot, to be fair, but what it did do was it paid off my debts. So I'm debt free at the moment, and I have a bit of money in the bank which will get me through a few months of transition, but it's not going to last very long, and I don't want to go back into debt. So I want to make it clear, I am doing this as a lifestyle lifestyle job. You describe it as hobby, I always call it a lifestyle job, but I'm not choosing to do it that way. I am being forced into that as an option, otherwise there is no other option. So I think I've responded a lot against those word choices. I want to reiterate, this is by no means what I would be choosing to do. Next sentence, which kind of got to me a bit. I read the comment, so you'll be able to replace the van when you've worn it out and subsidise your earnings in order to pay your bills, as a bit patronising. I think what JBVann has done here is used the opportunity to remind me that my van gets old and needs replacing, and I know that, and I have got in place, part of my business expenses is to cover for a new van. Now, at the moment, I'm going to struggle to do that. That is true, but hopefully this is a reasonably temporary situation. but I am aware of that, and this is one of the things that people who are experienced tend to think that someone like me doesn't know. They think that I've got a van. So at the moment, just to give context, I've got an old van. I own it outright. I bought it 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, can't remember. 2001, so 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago nearly. And I need this van to work for me for at least another year and a half. If it does that, I'll be happy with this van. Now, at some point, I know I'm going to have to get another vehicle. The longer this van lasts me, the less of a concern the next vehicle is for me. But I know that I've got to get one. It's always on my mind, and it just seems to me that some people who are experienced seem to think that people like me don't know that. Anyway, that's my point about that. And maybe JBVann didn't mean that, so I'm reading a lot into that, but that's how I took it. And it's more about, I've had other comments from other people and seen other indirect comments from other people that give that impression. Next bit, it's also important to know your audience. Many people on CX don't have the privilege you have, so can't understand it, and also probably seems unfair to them that you can choose to buy in the work just because you enjoy it. Well, I completely reject that comment. Why is it important that I know my audience? How am I going to know my audience? I've told you at the start that I don't know who my audience is, I just know numbers. I basically have an assumption about my audience. My assumption is they are in their 50s and 60s, either doing this job for a long time or retired, and they're generally male and living in England, or Britain at least. I only know that from the stats. But even in the sort of mid-50s white male English guy, even if I take 100 of those, there's going to be a lot of variety in that from experience and personality. So I don't make any assumptions about what anyone is like on my audience. I would never do that. All I do is I assume that I have an audience, but who you are, I've got absolutely no idea what your background is, what your experience is, what your personality is, unless you engage with me up through the comments. And only through an ongoing engagement through the comments can I get any kind of idea about who my audience might be, and that's that one person. So I completely reject that it's my responsibility to understand my audience. That's your responsibility. If you want to engage, tell me who you are. And if there are people, take it face value, if there are people that think it's unfair that I can afford to do this part-time, well, that's on them. That's not my responsibility. I'm not going to change what I say in case I offend someone because I think I've got a privileged lifestyle. I don't believe that in the way that you described it, I am privileged. I am privileged in many ways. I live in a Western country. I speak English fluently. I've got a great partner. I have great children. There are lots of ways in which I'm privileged, but I reject the fact that I'm privileged that I can afford, if it comes to do this as a lifestyle. The whole point of this is I can't afford to do that. I'm trying to be adaptive to the situation, and I'm also sharing that live as it happens. And so that's what I would say there. If people are choosing to take from this some sort of envy, then that's down to them to deal with, not me. Next paragraph, and this is coming towards the end now, so this is an interesting paragraph. The first time I read it, it really triggered me. It really did trigger me, but after having read it again, the whole thing, I've got a context that I can understand. So, you don't want advice, but I'm going to offer you some based on your YouTube journey we've had together. Do with it what you like, ignore it if you're too proud. I put a bit of emphasis on there on what I thought it would sound like. So that whole paragraph, I think, is triggering for me, and I will deal with that for myself. And I will deal with that first of all by telling you why. I mentioned in my video I didn't want advice. That's my decision and my choice. That's where I have power over my own life. Some people, and this paragraph in particular, is saying, I've heard you say that, but I'm going to ignore that now. So you're saying in this context, I'm going to ignore the thing you said for me to do. So they're going to now offer me advice. But they did couch it by saying, based upon the YouTube journey we've had together. So I think there's enough compassion in that comment that means I can take it as being, it's meant from a good place, not from a negative place. And the final thing, I think the final sentence is unnecessary and irrelevant. I think it's just perhaps a matter of habit. Do with it what you like. Yeah, fine, stop there. But why would you have to write, ignore it if you're too proud? Now, if you knew me at all, you wouldn't need to write that sentence, because I'm never going to ignore anything anyone writes on my YouTube channel. And also, am I too proud to ignore something? No, it's not pride if you choose to ignore something. It's about taking control. It's about knowing who you are, knowing what you will engage with and what won't engage with. That's not, in my view, pride. That's about knowing what is worth listening to and what's not. Surely, I'm going to ask you a question here, JBVann. Surely you understand that there are some comments that are given on social media that are not meant to be constructive, that are not meant to be positive. And if the person chooses to ignore those, are they being too proud, or are they being self-protective, or are they being understanding about what they want to engage with? So I think that's not necessary to put that in, but I understand that in the context of this whole comment, I would forgive that. Right, here we go. I think there's three paragraphs. The last paragraph is more of a signing off paragraph. So these are the next two paragraphs are the more substantive ones. So we're on 41 minutes. So number one, stop discussing your financials on YouTube. They bear absolutely no importance to you because you're not doing it for that. But in reality, it's the only metric that most of the other people working in the sector choose to value. Also, your figures aren't that useful to anyone wanting to get into the sector, as you're not running it as a viable, sustainable business. You're doing it for the love of it, so talk about that more. So, I thought about, when I had my video, when I was going basically to 3 days a week, I did think about what is the value now of me giving out financials, because I'm not doing it full time anymore, and I mentioned this in my video. And then I thought, no, there is value, because I'm doing this part-time now, not through choice, because I have to. So what if there's someone out there who can't do this full-time, wants to do it part-time, but still wants to know what you can earn? Surely for them, this is really valuable. Also, what about those people that have no idea about this sector at all, and want to know what you can earn on CX? We all know, don't we, who are doing this in real, that the CX is kind of the bottom of the barrel when it comes to pay rates, and that it's really hard to earn a living just off CX. I happen to believe that some people can, some people can't. It depends on your personal situation. But surely by making my financials, I'm actually highlighting how hard it is to earn any kind of money on CX part-time as well as full-time. So for those reasons, I think there's still value in me giving out my financials. So in this respect, I completely disagree that I should stop doing that. But I do agree with your other points, that it is a metric that most people who do it look at as being important. But if I am being open and honest about what I'm doing and why, if somebody takes, this is what I was thinking, this is a thought experiment. Let's take this situation where someone comes to my channel, watches one video and goes, right, that's what he's earning, I can earn that, I'm going to do career work. I just don't think that exists. I don't think that person exists. I think anyone who doesn't do it will be looking at a lot of videos, will have some sort of idea as to what they need to live off, and they may or may not make a mistake when they come onto it. We all make mistakes when we first join. But me not showing my real life experiences is actually not going to help anyone. It's going to hide the reality. So people will see my videos, they will either engage with them or they won't. There's a very specific style to them which works for some people, doesn't work for others. But no one's going to take my videos in isolation and make life-changing decisions based on that. I really don't believe that is the case. And if you do think that's the case, I think you're underestimating other people. There's another comment that was made that I think is close to this, which is really relevant, which I'm going to mention in my next video. But for the sake of this, I just completely reject that statement in its entirety, except for the fact that it's true my figures aren't useful to anybody who wants to do this full time in isolation, but they are valuable as part of a whole gathering of data. And I'm not doing it, and again, not by choice, I'm not doing it as sustainable business, but I will give figures about what sustainable business looks like in our next video, at least for me at least. And I am doing it for the love of it, and maybe I should talk more about that, maybe I will, but I'm not going to not do the financials, because I think there's still value in that. And also there's value, I think, in seeing my journey. I'm in a transitional period of my life, and I'm sharing that on YouTube. I'm hoping that things will get better in the future, and we'll look back on this and laugh one day. Do you remember that time when you had to work 3 days a week? Oh, that was really difficult, wasn't it? It may never happen, but I'm not going to assume I can't ever get back to full time. So I'm on a journey, I'm sharing that journey. I choose to share that journey with strangers on the internet, and I choose to engage with those that I think are legitimately worth engaging with. So, sorry JBVann, I'm not going to stop doing the financials. They do have less value, but they don't have no value. Okay, number 2, I'm really sorry you're having health issues, thank you. I think you could mitigate some of these issues you're having professionally with not being able to lift and having to be back for dialysis, etc., by swapping out the LWB, long wheelbase van, for a small van. In my honest opinion, it's just way more enjoyable, cheaper to run, and if you have to dead mine at home from Scotland, it isn't going to kick your nuts all the way home. Nice expression there, kick your nuts. They're also way cheaper to replace, insure, and easy to drive. Walking into office to collect an A4 envelope is also a complete joy compared to having to wait for a forklift driver to pull a 3-metre pallet out of there, whatever. I also think that you won't see any loss of earnings. You seem to be charging the cheaper end, the small van rate, a lot of the time at the moment anyway. Right, so really good paragraph there, and I've got a lot to say about it. So, thank you for the initial bit about the empathy. That helps a lot with me to like you. I hear a lot about people who kind of prefer small vans or prefer long wheelbase vans. I don't really engage with Lutons, it's not really my scene. And I think that people tend to have a preferred van because of their experience. And I'm not saying that anything that JBVann said here was incorrect. I think all of that bit about small van work is correct. But, and it's not that I won't ever go to a small van, maybe I will one day, but right now, I live in a reasonably rural area, and although JBVann thinks I do a lot of small van work pricing, I actually do a reasonable amount of long and medium wheelbase work at a decent price, at £1, £1.10, £1.20. It's not the best price in the world, but it's definitely a sustainable price. I haven't looked back and sort of added up with the percentage, but I'm going to guess half of my work is long, medium wheelbase van, and half is short wheelbase or small. Now, if I was to move my van to a small van, I'd have no access to those palletised loads that I can take at the moment from the local factories. And I do have a contact that will always give me the job if I'm in the area and bid on it at a reasonably good price. So I just don't live in the right area of the country to not have a long wheelbase van. But other than that, the points that you make about small vans I completely agree with. and also I do like the option to tramp, and having a high van I can stand in makes that really good. So for the time being, I'm not going to change my van. And I do have the option to do small van work if I need to. I also have the option to do palletised stuff. So I think that's probably all of that one. Final paragraph. Whatever you choose to do, earnestly, I wish you good luck, and I hope you can make it meaningful, fulfilling, and sustainable in order that you can keep doing what you love for as long as you please. If you want to flip, right, so I'll leave it there, right? At this point, what a brilliant end and finishing chapter. It shows great compassion and empathy, and it really is heartening to hear that there's someone out there that genuinely wants me to succeed and wants me to do well, and I really appreciate that. Why then do this final bit, JBVann? If you want to flip this off as some random on YouTube and you know better than that, it'll probably make for more interesting viewing. I don't really get the last bit. I don't think that adds anything to the sentence. It's like you don't have faith I would take this seriously. That I might just flip it off as being, oh, just another person attacking me. I hope I've proven that I haven't done that, but then maybe you thought I would because of whatever perception you have. But I wanted to prove that that's not how I treat these comments, even though when I first read it I had a very negative reaction. So that brings me to the end of that reaction video. 51 minutes so far. I have got a few other things in relation to that to say, but I'm going to put them into my next video about today's work. So on that note, thank you very much to that amazing comment from JBVann. I hope that you are being successful however you choose to define it for yourself, and I'll look forward to your next comment at some point in the near future. Farewell.